Hello, everyone, and welcome to Medical Devices Innovation in Healthcare. My name is Dustin Klemkin. I'm an application engineer at HP, and I will be your moderator today. And lucky enough, we will be joined by Alex and Sean of Quorum, or opquorum.com. We're excited to learn a little bit more about some of the innovations that they've been working on at their company. Now, before we begin today, I'd just like to mention that this is a little bit different style webinar than what you might have been used to attending. You might see that there are some resources on the upper right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to look through some of those documents as we're going through this presentation today. Also, make sure to put your questions in the chat. We'll be going through a lot of different questions today, but it's always much more interactive and interesting when you have your questions out there and we can lob them at the experts, Alex and Sean, today. So now that we've gotten the housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and start. And I'm going to pass it over to Alex and Sean so they can tell us a little bit about their company and what they've been doing in innovation. So Alex.
Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate it. And thank you so much for having us today. We're really excited about this. So as you mentioned, I am with OP Quorum. We're a manufacturing and a prosthetic company here in Windsor, Colorado. And joining me today is Sean McClure, our lead engineer. And we've been working a lot recently on getting our product ready to actually start manufacturing using completely just 3D printing and additive manufacturing processes. So we're really excited to give our presentation and tell you a little bit more about it. Dustin, are these slides going to be coming up? Thank you. So yeah, we go to the next slide, please. I want to start our presentation by talking a little bit about our friend Rustin, because the best way to talk about the business and to really explain what it is we're trying to do is to talk about the people that this affects. So Rustin is a veteran and extreme athlete. He actually does two major sports. He does both jiu-jitsu and professional boxing. And he's also an amputee. And you can see him in the photo there on the right side. He has a right leg amputation above his knee. And as anyone can imagine, especially if you really understand amputations and really this industry, an above the knee amputation is one of the most complicated ones out there. If you think about your knee and just how much it does and how integral it is just towards your movement, towards sports, towards anything you want to do, this is one of the most complicated amputations out there. So as such, Rustin was having a lot of different problems and a lot of different situations that he would find himself in that just the average person wouldn't even think about. If you go to the next slide. And one of the big complications he was seeing is that first thing in the morning, when you first wake up, and I think this happens to anybody, a lot of times your limbs, just different parts of your body can be inflamed. They're a little bit bigger, you're just getting out of sleep, you're warmer, your body. So he would wake up first thing in the morning and he'd find out that his limb's a little bit too big for his socket. And just to give a quick overview, a socket is basically the piece that connects your prosthetic to the actual limb itself. And I'll show a photo of it a little bit later on in the presentation, but it's kind of a cup-shaped device that really just slides right over the limb. So Rustin was finding that the socket that he had, it was made just big enough that he could fit it first thing in the morning when he's inflamed, but is also small enough that it would be able to fit throughout the whole day, which really with this rigid socket without any kind of movement, any kind of ability to adjust it, it wasn't working well for him. It's taken him as much as 10 minutes just to put it on first thing in the morning. So that was one half of the problem. The other half of the problem is that as the day goes on and his limb kind of shrinks in size, Rustin was finding out that he was now getting an uncomfortable socket that didn't fit right. And not only is that uncomfortable, but it's also dangerous now because at any moment the socket could slip, he could have an injury that could be associated with that. So to try to keep it fitting well, to keep it so it fit on his limb well, he was actually resorting to using socks around the limb and padding with 1, 2, sometimes 3 socks just to get the right kind of fit. Something that he had to change throughout the day, something that was uncomfortable, sweaty, itchy. It was really just, it's kind of crazy that here we are in 2020 and people are still using these kind of tactics just to get their prosthetics to fit correctly. So next slide, please. At this point, Rustin had a chance to meet Joe Johnson, who's the CEO of Quorum Prosthetics. And Joe had a patented new device. And as I promised before, this is the socket that I was talking about before. A new device for a socket called the Quattro system. And what the Quattro is able to do that typical sockets can't is it's able to be adjustable. It's able to actually adjust it so you can fit the volume of the limb based on where it is at that moment in time. So what this means for Rustin's situation is first thing in the morning, he's able to fit it on, and he's able to do that through the use of BOA dials. Anybody that's familiar with the BOA dial, they're often found on ski boots, on work boots, things of that nature. They're basically those circle devices you see on the outside of the socket. You can turn them to the left and to the right, and you're able to just very quickly adjust the volume and the compression of the device itself by loosening and tightening it using those BOA dials. Now, as you can see on the image on the right, the Quattro system uses 4 different pads, all on the different sides of the actual socket itself. And using those BOA dials and longitudinal compression, we can quickly turn the dial and we can quickly just move those pads in and out to allow different volumes and different levels of compression. So for Rustin's situation, it means first thing in the morning, he can quickly turn that dial, he can slip the socket on, he can quickly turn it again, have it be secure on there, and the whole process takes about 20 seconds to do, as opposed to the 10 minutes before. It also means that throughout the entire day, when his limb fluctuates in size and gets a little bit smaller, he can then use those same BOA dials to quickly adjust the compression again. And he's able to very, very do minute micro adjustments to make sure that his limb fits in that perfectly all day. In fact, for Rustin's situation, when he does professional boxing, he's found that in the middle of a match, he doesn't have to take off his gloves. He doesn't have to wait until a break. He can take the side of his glove and he can just quickly hit it on the side of the BOA dial and adjust it without having to miss a beat, which gives him a huge advantage over the competition. And the best thing about it, the Quattro system is a technology itself. So the socket that you see pictured in this device, it's the Hi-Fi system out of California. And we found it to be really, really great for our purposes. It offers a lot of intrinsic bone control and other benefits. But if our patient has a suction socket or a lanyard system or something that they've been using for a long time that they like, we can put the Quattro technology directly in any socket on the market right now. Next slide, please. So Quorum, we've been around for about 2 decades now. We're located in beautiful, sunny Windsor, Colorado, and we see about 4,000 patients a year. But that's the clinic side of what we do. And while that's really important, it's given us the beginnings of what we're trying to do, what we're really excited about right now is additive manufacturing and bringing that into our manufacturing process, because now we're able to move all of our production to 3D printing, which means that what we were doing before is kind of a wet lamination process using carbon fiber. It was messy, it was time consuming. It took a dedicated practitioner an entire day to make one of these Quattros. Well, we can now pump these things out using 3D printers. We can print anywhere in the country. And even more excitingly, we could have a prosthetist literally anywhere in the world take a measurement using a 3D scanner of a patient's limb, of their existing socket, of a few different routes to do this. And they can then send us that 3D model, which means we can take that 3D model, we can make a custom made Quattro that fits perfectly onto this patient, and we can ship it anywhere in the world at that point. This opens up a world of opportunity for us on the business side of things. It means that we can serve patients literally anywhere in the world. And it means that we can scale our business to a much, much higher degree that we've never been able to do before. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Sean McClure. He's our lead engineer, and he can tell you a little bit more about the 3D printing process and how it works for making these sockets.
Hi guys, thanks Alex. Yeah, like Alex said, I'm the lead engineer here. I started with Quorum Prosthetics back in June. Prior to that, I was at Colorado State University as a dual degree in biomedical and mechanical engineering. In my senior year, I was able to conduct a research experiment and project for Quorum Prosthetics, kind of analyzing the benefits and the functionality of the Quattro system. So when I started here in June, Joe had came to me with a 3D printed socket, which was really cool. And so I wanted to explore that idea of printing a definitive socket further. And so we did a ton of research into different machines and technologies that would be able to give us the ability to print these high quality end products for our patients. And so throughout our research, we found that the multi-jet fusion printers from HP were going to be the best route to take initially. And so the biggest reason that we went with the HP 4200 and 5200 series was the large build volume that gave us the ability to build these large sockets. Because as you can imagine, we're basically printing a full-size human leg above the knee. That's the biggest sockets that we see. And so the build volume was really important. The next thing was the build time. We wanted to be able to produce these high quality sockets in, the least amount of time possible. And so we found that the HP machines gave us a really quick build time. And then the most important thing that we needed was the accuracy. So this technology gave us the ability to accurately print the interfaces for the BOA dials and the lines and all the intricacies of this complicated, complex socket system. And so the HP machines gave us, by far the best accuracy with minimal intervention with calibration and things like that between prints. And so it was a really simple but high quality system that gave us these complex sockets. And the next thing is the materials. So we actually use a flexible inner liner that goes inside the socket that acts as the structural component of the entire socket. So we are using Lubrizol's Estain TPU for the flexible inner, and the ability to change from printing the flexible inner to the nylon-based PA12 material for the hard structure on the outside. There's no comparison in being able to switch between these materials in the printing process. One other benefit of the HP program is there's the 3D as a service, which allows us to kind of automate the infrastructure of the material supply chain, and that gives us, they basically ship us all the material and we only pay for it as we use it. And there's no need for us to really keep track of the inventory as it's all automated for us. Next slide, please. And so traditionally, these sockets are made by hand by practitioners and technicians alike. And so first it starts off where the practitioner will see the patient, make a cast of the residual limb, and then that cast will be poured up in plaster, where that plaster positive mold is then used as the form for our laminated sockets that have carbon fiber and a resin vacuum formed over that mold. And so, as you can see on the left, it takes quite a bit of time to create and fit and see patients throughout the day. And a technician can usually only produce about one socket per day if that's the only thing that they can focus on. And a practitioner can see, 1 to 2 patients per day. But with the digital workflow now that we're incorporating, we can scan a patient's limb, scan a mold, scan an existing socket in 30 minutes and be able to replicate that, their fit or the existing socket very quickly, and import that into our design CAD software, where we can make all of our adjustments and designs for that socket relatively quickly. And then with the printers, we send that off to the printer, and we can fit 4 below the knee sockets in one build volume, or up to 2 above the knee sockets in the HP build volume. And this makes it a very fast and reliable way of creating a lot of sockets in less time. Next slide, please. And so we've done tons of comparisons between the traditional sockets and these 3D printed sockets, and the quality that we have seen is incredible. And some of the comments that we received on this picture of Rustin on the left is that he looks like RoboCop or the Terminator or something like that. And so we're getting lots of positive feedback from patients and others that really love the aesthetic of the 3D printed sockets. And we can actually lightweight these sockets significantly from the traditional resin and carbon fiber sockets. And so with this, the patient has a lot of input into what the aesthetic of their socket is like. And so this gives them more confidence in how their socket functions and looks. And so that'll lead to a higher acceptance rate of these prosthetic devices. And so, and again, with the light weighting, we can more accurately represent the weight of the anatomical limb, which increases the comfort and the usability of these prosthetic devices. And so now I'd like to show some examples on screen of different sockets. So this socket here is a traditional laminated socket where the flexible inner is also made and pulled over that mold, as I discussed earlier. And so the biggest difficulty of replicating a traditional socket is that when we pull this flexible material over the mold, it is really hard to keep the wall thickness and the general thicknesses consistent. And so with 3D printing and 3D design, we can make a uniform wall thickness throughout the entire socket and easily replicate that flexible inner. And so if there is any changes in their fit or volume change or anything like that, that's major that we can't compensate with the Quattro BOA dials, we can easily reprint the flexible inner socket without having to replace the entire socket. So traditionally with this mold, we wouldn't be able to replicate this exact fit again using traditional methods. Whereas with 3D design and printing, we can easily replicate the flexible inner to be able to fit the new changes in that residual limb. And so I'll give kind of a demo on the newer one. So this is a 3D printed Quattro, where these panels will actually come out and we can pop the BOA dial in, crank it down, and suck those panels in. And then the brim up here on the medial side is able to adjust as well. So they can open that up, get seated fully down into it, and then tighten up the brim dial to tighten up that brim as well. And so some of the tests that we went through, we noticed that on other machines, we weren't able to get the detail that we needed on this BOA dial, where the BOA dial locks into place. And so we were having a hard time fitting those. But with the HP machine, we found that the detail was excellent and we had no issues getting those BOA dials in. And so one of the earliest models, actually, we had the BOA dial up here closer to the brim. And that was one thing that we saw with patients' feedback, was that it was really difficult and it would hit on, their pant legs or get caught. And so we were with 3D modeling and printing, we were easily able to move that dial back down to the distal end, so that they were able to, adjust the dials throughout the day without having to, take their pants off or adjust their pants or adjust the socket through their pants or anything like that. And so another one, so the previous sockets that I showed use a lanyard system, but this one uses a pin lock system. And so there's a plunger in there that has a pin that locks their residual limb into the socket as their suspension system. And then this one, we were able to put all 3 dials right on the front and give it a better functionality. And then the great thing about 3D printing as well with the HP is we can emboss different logos. It's kind of hard to see, but we can emboss different logos and other customizations, either that the patient wants or for serializing different versions of the sockets that we decide to do. And we are able to, dye and do other customizations to the sockets as well. I have one here that is actually hydro dipped, so they can customize their patterns or whatever they want it to look like. And we can actually hydro dip the socket once it's done printing to give the patient a little bit more customization as well. And so with all of these, inputs from patients, it leads to a high success rate and acceptance rate of these prosthetic devices and gives the patients more confidence in their overall devices. And so with that, I thank you guys for your time, and I will open it up for any questions that we have in discussion.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Alex. That's a great overview. Really cool story about Rustin, Alex. And Sean, thanks for taking some time to go through some of those designs, because to me, that's some of the most interesting stuff, because that's where you can really impact someone's life. So what I'd like to do with this next section is just to take a couple of minutes and try to peel back the onion a little bit more about what you guys do. And the reason why is I encounter a lot of people working in 3D, or as I'm working in 3D, that say, Dustin, how do you be successful with this technology? How do you really turn up the dial to make an impact? And an analogy you can kind of think about is anyone can buy a sports car, but to become a professional driver really takes some technique and some process. So I'd like to dive in to figure out a little bit more of how you guys have been able to make your patients successful. So I have a couple of questions lined up here. For those of you in the audience, again, remember to start putting some things into the chat as you have questions or you think of some things. But I'm hoping that this next little section will help you to think of some things that you might want to ask both Alex and Sean. I know I've been working in this space now for a little while, and these are some of the more innovative prosthetic designs that I've come across. So kudos to both you and Alex and Sean here. So my first question that I have, and this is probably directed maybe a bit more towards Alex, is when you guys first started into exploring the 3D space, and Sean, you probably have some comments here also, but did you select one person to lead the charge into exploring this technology? Because Sean, as you mentioned before, you guys were doing plaster and you could only do so much each day. So did you guys kind of select one person to become your quote unquote 3D expert to figure out what is the best path forward here?
Yeah, it's been kind of a changing narrative throughout the past, I'd say, a little over a year now. So I've started working with Joe August of last year. And at the time, we had an idea that we wanted to bring 3D printing into prosthetics. And there's a couple organizations that have been experimenting with it already. But with the Quattro system, this is a brand new idea, a brand new concept. And at the time we were completely, brand new to this. So
Mhm.
we had a lot of learning to do. And it all started with a grant application we did to the state of Colorado. And we were able to actually successfully get some grant funding to help us launch this program and get everything started. So when we pitched the grant, the knowledge that we had looking back now, it's silly how little we knew about the process and how much we've learned since then. I mean, at the time we were thinking that maybe we'd have to 3D print the cast itself to make these Quattro systems so we could fit a Quattro around it. And that's where the 3D printing would come in. We didn't think, because we had looked at 3D printers, 7-8 years ago, and we didn't think the technology was there. Well, we got hooked up with HP shortly after that. Luckily, we're in northern Colorado, and Hewlett-Packard has a huge center right here in Fort Collins. So we got to go to that center and talk to the people who actually, help build and run these machines and really have a lot of expertise. And that's when we learned that using nylon 12, the material is strong enough now that we can actually print these sockets themselves using 3D printing. So knowing that, and with a little bit of grant funding, that's when we started actually doing some tests with other organizations, having them start work out, doing outsourcing, having them work out the design concepts. And then during the summer of 2020 is when we got to hire Sean onto our team. And ever since then, he's been taking the lead as far as being our expert in all things additive manufacturing.
Okay. And Sean, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, in my engineering academic career, I had some experience in additive manufacturing. Most of it stemmed from, FDM processes for different prototyping and other projects that I had that I needed to manufacture small parts for different projects rapidly. But once I came on with Quorum and found that was like my first real exposure to the HP and multi-jet fusion technology. And I really saw the potential in it with, the differences between FDM and multi-jet fusion, where, the strength mostly in how the material is fused together, it's more of a homogeneous fusing process where we don't see those drastic effects in layer lines and the ability to basically print these complex structures in the build volume without the need for designing in specific supports or things like that. And just the strength of these and robustness of these parts coming off of this technology really proved that we could create a definitive 3D printed socket for these complex socket systems. Where traditionally we would be doing multiple laminations. We would do one lamination over for the base of the socket, and then have to route or basically put on our BOA dials, route all the lines, glue those to that first lamination, and then do a second and even sometimes a third lamination over those components to make sure that it's strong and it stays, all together and functions correctly.
Okay, that makes sense. So then my next question I have is kind of more of a business related question. So I'm going to direct it towards Alex. Alex, so why did Quorum decide to jump into the 3D printing space? Because if you think about it, it's kind of risky from a business standpoint to switch your whole work stream from something that's proven that you've worked on for years with plaster to a completely different methodology. Would you say this was more of an economics decision, or would you say that actually making this change helped to improve the results for your patients? Or did you even think about that on the front side?
Yeah, so I got to give full credit to our CEO, Joe Johnson here. He's always been the type that he's not afraid of a new challenge, of a new idea. I mean, the Quattro system itself is a brand new take on how to provide compression for a socket. So when it came to, about 6, 7, 8 months ago, not probably longer now, but when we first decided to make the decision to start moving to additive manufacturing, he jumped in both feet because he knew that this was going to revolutionize the way that we were able to create these products. Because what the real goal here at Quorum is we want to be able to get a Quattro system on anybody in the world who needs one. We want to be able to make the life better for any amputee out there, make it so they can have this kind of compression, so they can not be struggling with their sockets, so everybody out there can really be able to live the life that they deserve to live. So as far as the patient side goes, the Quattro technology was already proven. We already knew that this was the right way to go. But once we saw that we could do this on a global level, technically, I mean, at some point, we knew that additive manufacturing was going to be the way to go for us, because we want to be able to work with practitioners anywhere in the world and really be able to get Quattros on anybody out there who needs one.
So if I had to summarize that, I would probably say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys did this so that you could scale more, and also so you could keep improving on the design for better patient results.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Dustin, too, is the design itself with additive manufacturing. I mean, we're looking at a significantly lighter device. We're talking about a few pounds lighter, which when it comes to a prosthetic, anybody that deals with one of these, they know that light is the best way to go, and that a few pounds can make a huge, huge difference to someone. And also on that note, too, I mean, you saw a little bit with Sean's demonstration, but the traditional style of making these using carbon fiber, they're a very, very bulky device, which means that it can get in the way of your everyday life, what you're trying to do. And by using 3D printing, we're able to get the size of the device down significantly as well. And then also too, I mean, because we're customizing each one of these devices to each one of the patient's needs, we're able to put in any other kind of customizations, design features they want. I mean, anything from changing where a boa dial goes, like Sean explained, to putting a spot in there for a pedometer if somebody wants to be able to track their walking. I mean, anything is possible with 3D printing.
Okay. So to that point, Sean, what kind of feedback have you been getting from the patients that you've been working with? I mean, since you're actually fabricating the components and manipulating the designs, compared to what you've previously been working with, what are patients saying?
Yeah, I mean, the patients love these sockets. They love the sleek look. They love the fit and functionality of it. So we've been getting a lot of positive results just in their initial feedback. But what I really pride myself on too is getting, maybe their negative feedback. And like I discussed, the placement of BOA dials, I've gotten requests for different, attachments, that I could possibly add, like if they wanted to have, so like the pin locks, some of them come with different components that they might change out throughout the day, or different, attachments for like restringing the device. So if somebody's out, camping in the wilderness or something, and the BOA string breaks or something happens, they're able to have basically a restringing kit that they can put, attached to their device and keep it with them at all times. And some other things that are in the works is making some like modular panels. So if they are going throughout their day and they realize, okay, so like for Rustin, for example, if he wants to get a lot more compression, we can actually make a modular panel that he can add layers to, or different effective durometers with the flexible material to basically give him more or less compression for any situation that he's in.
So to expand on that a little bit more, and this is still with Sean here, where do you see this potentially going? What do you think will be, say, 5 years from now? Do you think the design is going to look like it does today, or do you think it's going to have additional features or additional capabilities? Because I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out, because they're like, okay, this is an interesting, cool technology. I can improve the design. I can scale. That's great. But where is this going, and where is this leading to? And now that you guys have been in this for a little bit, frankly, for a pretty short period of time, what are your creative juices telling you?
Oh man, that's a tough question to answer. It's because the possibilities are endless. I've got so many ideas. Our CEO Joe has tons of ideas. He comes to me, on a daily basis with a new idea. to just explore. And, I see an endless opportunity for tons of innovation and different routes that we can go. And so, early on in these stages of design and fabrication of these devices, I honestly, in 5 to 10 years, I'll probably look back and think that a lot of this is rudimentary of what we're doing now, because I just see it going so far in so many different ways.
And how about you, Alex? From a business strategy standpoint, where do you think this is going to lead to?
Ideally, we'd like to start working with different groups across the country. One of our first focuses is working with the Veterans Administration. We have 7 amputation centers across the country, one of which just happens to be right here in Denver. So we've been working really closely with some different veterans groups to try to work on getting some of our heroes into Quattros and finding the right kind of device for them. We also really want to get it to the point where we can come up with a device that could be international as well, a device that we could be putting on people all across the world who may not have the same access to practitioners and prosthetists that we do here in America. So I do see some sort of change in the future in which we're able to offer a specialized device that could fit anybody and everybody. But really the whole point, like you said, Dustin, is to really be able to scale this device in whatever way could work best for our users across the country. And we're always looking for feedback from both them and the prosthetists themselves for how to best do that.
Okay. And one of the questions that just came in from the audience is, Alex, would you guys say that Quorum is leading the industry with this approach, or are others taking a similar approach to the Quadro system?
For the Quattro system, we have a definite design advantage right now using the longitudinal compression. It offers a lot better, more surface area in which it's able to grip the limb. It offers a tighter, more kind of sensible fit that you don't need to use a belt system, which could slip, it can break, and it also puts a pressure point on certain parts of the limb. So we have a huge advantage in our patented technology in that regard. And then as far as the 3D printing, the additive manufacturing side goes, there are a couple other organizations that we've worked with in the past. They're doing some great work as well in this realm. But there's really, I mean, we're talking like you can count on one hand the number of organizations that are really successfully doing this that we've been able to find anyways on a national level. So there's definitely some room to grow here and a market that's, I think, ready to be captured, and hoping that Quorum's going to be positioned to do so.
Great. So I'd like to kind of take a step back a little bit from kind of when you first got started with 3D printing and using this technology in your business, because when you're having to shift some of your internal business processes, there's a learning curve there of trying to figure out who handles what and where potential pitfalls are and make sure you have the right expertise there. So how long would you say after working with this technology did you really start to see results for your patients? Or how long did it take until your patients started commenting to you to say, hey, I really like what you guys are doing and I want more of it? And why don't we start with Alex here?
So ever since the first iterations of the Quattro, we've been seeing some amazing feedback from our patients. And these things were bulky, heavy, and had all the problems that we've been able to fix now. And people still were like coming back to us and saying how much they loved it. So with every iteration we do, and especially now that we're doing 3D printing, we're getting a lot of really positive feedback. And we're obviously making any changes we can based on the patient's feedback as well. It's really been a work in progress throughout this whole time, though. And as Sean mentioned, I believe it's going to keep being that way because we want to keep making this product better and better and making sure that we're able to serve our patients in the best way possible.
Okay. And Sean, there's a kind of a similar question here in the chat related to this. Given that you guys were seeing successes right away, how much percentage of the people that you worked with would you say wanted to have additional decorations like hydro dipping or logos or something like that? Is that something that a lot of people were requesting right away and it kind of fizzled out? Or is this something that's kind of built up over time where more and more people want something like that?
Well, yeah, with this technology coming out and what we've been doing, I've been seeing, more and more people requesting these specific features or decorations or designs. And so with, once they see the power of it and that we can pretty much do anything, I've been seeing basically every person that we fit with a 3D printed socket, they have their own ideas of how to implement, their wants and needs. Like, if somebody really likes, Batman or something, I can put a Batman logo on there. Or if they want to have like, say, an attachment point for, we work with a lot of veterans. So they're like, oh, can you put a holster for a gun or a sleeve or or a knife or something like that, they really want to see something like that just to kind of add to the functionality of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So to that point, then, it kind of sounds like to me that your definition of customer success or patient success has shifted. Maybe, and I'll direct this back at Sean, how would you say success has changed for you with how you define it compared to when you guys were doing maybe plasters before? And Sean, you may or may not be able to comment, but how would you say that mindset has shifted? How did you define success before, and what is it like now?
Yeah, a lot of it before was based on how the prosthesis was fitting and functioning. Were they confident in the fit and being able to walk on it, and just more of the functionality and the comfort of those sockets. But now I see the shift going towards, being able to deliver the requests and the desires of the patient on more of the aesthetic and personalization side. And so having that ability for customers to have their input and be involved in their design process of their own device, I think is really where the shift in the success for patients is moving towards.
Okay. And Alex, I'll just throw it at you. Do you have any comments there at all?
Yeah, the one thing I'll add too is that with 3D printing, because it's so customizable and kind of custom made for each patient, we're able to do a lot more different kinds of variations of the Quattro as well that weren't really, as easily accessible before. We're able to help people with below the knee amputations at a level we weren't really able to do before. We're working a little bit more with the arms too, above and below the elbows. So we're able to do a lot more in that kind of regard. And also, as Sean mentioned, we've got a lot of different ideas in the pipeline as well too, as far as, like different kinds of braces and things like that could also be used in this field as well, that work in conjunction with what we're trying to do with some of these prosthetics.
Okay. Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that again, we've been working with a lot of pediatric patients as well. And pediatrics can be really tough because they grow so fast and their bodies are changing so much faster than an adult. Yeah. And so we can actually implement modular socket designs that allow us to print one socket for a pediatric patient and be able to make those adjustments as they grow without having to come back and refit them all over again.
Mm-hmm. Really good point. And to kind of build on that a little bit, a really good question I got from the audience, which I knew would happen, and I'm sure you guys are ready for, is people want to know, how would you say this material and your designs are doing in terms of durability compared to your traditionally designed components? And maybe I'll throw that at Sean, since you're kind of on the ground making the components.
Yeah, so being able to add features to these designs, I've got, so this one here, I've actually incorporated some engineering, concepts that I've learned in my academics by adding like an I-beam structure to add to the durability of this socket. And so, with 3D printing design, I can add any kind of engineering strengthening feature that is required. So having a solid understanding of the material properties and doing finite element analysis, I'm able to create these sockets in a way that traditionally we weren't able to do before. Whereas traditionally we would just add, maybe a few more layers of carbon fiber, maybe kind of web those together in a way to make it more strong, but that adds bulk. And so with this, I'm able to add material in a more strategic way that allows us to reduce the weight and keep it as simple as possible without, compromising the structural integrity of these sockets.
So it sounds like you guys are really getting a lot more sophisticated with your design to put material only where you need it, and to like keep that lightweight rigidity, but probably flex where you want it also, because that's the key. I mean, we're dynamic creatures.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest challenge right now, is capturing the really complex curvatures of the body, keeping it as anatomical as possible, but using, the engineering techniques that have not really been utilized in the socket design in the past.
Yeah, maybe someday there will almost be like a FEA analysis for different components or something like that. I don't know how that would work necessarily, but to figure out where those hot spots, cold spots, more rigid, more flexible spots that you need to be for the design.
Yep, exactly.
So one question we have from the audience here is, are you guys doing any upper limb prosthetics at all?
We've done a few. I don't think we've gotten 3D printed upper limb sockets done yet. A lot of our patients are lower limb amputees, but we fit traditionally in our clinic over the past 20 years, we've fit several upper limb amputees as well. But
Okay.
yeah, there's no limitation to what we can do with the Quattro technology on different amputees.
Great. And another question here, and I'm just going to read this because it's pretty specific. I think it's mainly for Sean, but it says, how are your experiences with 3D printed soft sockets or inner sockets as an alternative to something like super soft thermal vacuumed sockets, for example?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of good success with these because, like I said earlier, traditionally to replicate a flexible soft inner socket, it's really hard to get that same fit and shape over again, because as we're pulling over the mold, that it's really difficult to keep that material from stretching in one direction and thinning out in one spot. And so with 3D printing, we can keep it uniform and uniform thickness. So like on these flexible inner sockets, we can actually, this one was for a suction. And so we've got the hole for the valve, but basically if this ever failed or if we needed to remake it for any reason, it's easy to go back into our digital design and make the changes we need or just replicate a new one. And so these flexible inner sockets, I think, are the game changer when it comes to replicating an existing socket or making those fit changes in fit to allow for us to keep the original socket the way that it is and just replace that flexible inner. And these we can customize each little feature. So like on this one, there's a ridge at the top brim that we made a little bit thicker to give them that comfort around that brim, and but then the flexibility that we want to keep as well. So we've had tons of success with this flexible soft inner liner.
Great. And just so the audience knows, if they're brand new to 3D printing, which materials are you showing off right there?
So both of these flexibles are Lubrizol Estain M95 TPU. And one is just dyed black and the other one's a natural finish.
Okay, great. So to kind of expand on this, and I'll direct this next question to Alex. So given that you have this new adaptable tool in your guys' wheelhouse, are you guys finding that you're able to help patients in different ways that you didn't think were possible in the past today? And do you think that's going to grow in the future if that is the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Quattro system itself is kind of a game changer for so many people. We as a people have been experimenting with adjustable sockets for a little while now, but a lot of the different systems out there just have a lot of weakness and it can be problematic in some different ways that the Quattro system itself is able to kind of build on that and really solve some of those same problems. So in that regard, I think we were able to help a new and more wide variety of patients that otherwise weren't really able to be helped before. A lot of people have been kind of settling for, some of these rigid sockets I described in the beginning that they're now able to, save themselves 10 minutes a day over 365 days a year. That starts to add up after a while and starts making a major impact on people's lives. And then as far as 3D printing goes too, because of all those different modifications that Sean was talking about, we can really customize it to be really kind of the perfect device and fit for each individual and their lifestyle, because we're all very different people with very different kind of needs and desires. So to be able to make a socket that has the extra kind of strength in certain areas, that if they are doing something like, jumping off ladders every day for their career, we can make this the right kind of socket to have the support to be able to kind of help that. Or if they need something that's super light because they're an athlete, we can make the socket that can really kind of work for that kind of lifestyle as well.
Cool. Just to build upon that, our biggest goal is to keep these patients in one socket for as long as possible, where, in the past we've seen patients, run through different sockets because maybe a change in fit or something like that, something minor that could be avoided, that leads to them having to replace an entire socket, where our goal is to basically create a socket that they can stay in for an extended period of time, 1, 2, 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Great. So then another question I have from the audience here is, how do those who need prosthetic devices end up coming to you? Or how do people work with you?
So there's a couple of different ways. We've been working primarily in Colorado and Wyoming recently. We have offices in Windsor, down in Aurora, and also up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our patients and those we've been making these 3D printed Quattros for have been our own patients so far. But we've just started working with a few different organizations across the country, including we're starting to work with an organization in the Midwest who also will be working with a study on in the near future through the University of Michigan. We've been working with a few other organizations that are doing studies and other kinds of prints for their patients. So the way we want to be able to move our manufacturing is to go completely just getting scans from practitioners across the country, working with them on the individual patient's needs, and being just a manufacturer at that point. We still will have our clinic and we'll still have our offices here locally, but we really want to focus on the growth that comes with being a manufacturer and working with people across the country and eventually across the world as well.
Great. Okay. So we're getting close to the end of the hour. So I think we'll just take one last question. Actually, instead, what I'm going to do is turn it back to, we'll do Sean first and then Alex. Sean, do you have any kind of general comments or ideas about what your experience has been like overall, or anything that you want to make sure the audience out there knows about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about before, it is kind of a, big risk to kind of jump in with both feet like our CEO did. But I think the benefits outweigh the risk by a landslide. And just the possibilities, it just opens up the entire horizon for different routes that we can take and different possibilities. So 3D additive manufacturing is definitely changing the way that the world kind of interacts and works on the manufacturing scale. And so don't be afraid to kind of jump in and try it, and even work with other, service bureaus or other people like us, or, Avid Product Development and Loveland and different service bureaus like that offer this kind of technology. To just try it out and see it for yourself, because that's kind of how we got started. And now that we're in it, we're not looking back.
Great. And I'll give the last word to you, Alex. Alex, do you have any kind of closing comments?
Sure, yeah. So I'll just say we are super excited about this new kind of revolution in the way we're trying to do things here at Quorum. We love 3D printing. We love everything that it's bringing forth for the Quattro. This is a product that we were already very excited about, and this is just making it, 10 times better. So what I would just say is I invite anybody who's listening to the presentation. It's really hard to convey what this product can do and what 3D printing can do through a Zoom presentation. So if anybody is interested in just learning more, talking to us, they just want to hear about our experience, they want to know about the product, how additive manufacturing's changed things, we'd love to have a conversation with you. I know we put up my information before, and I can put it up again later on in the chat, but we just want to make sure that if anybody's interested in just learning more, reach out to us by email. We'll set up a conversation, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about what you're trying to do and how we can be a part of that and try to help you out in the process.
Very good. And Alex, thank you so much for getting those parts today. I think it makes it a lot more real for people, because when you see things on a screen or you're kind of describing things, that's one thing, but to actually have the parts and show them and show different iterations, to me, it's much more powerful. So thanks for putting that together. So since we are near the top of the hour, and I know many of you here probably are on back-to-back calls during the day, we're going to end this a little bit early. I know I didn't get to all the questions. So if you do have existing questions, don't worry, we're going to be following up with an email communication with you with a link to this recording. Also, if you didn't happen to get a chance to review all the resources that are up in the window there, we'll be making sure you get access to that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Alex and Sean, for sharing a little bit of your experience and what Quorum's been doing, and keep leading the way and innovating, because I also believe there's a lot of possibility of where this is going to go. It's going to be really cool to see where designs are 5 years from now. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off, and thank you all for joining today.
Awesome. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you, guys.